Okay, hello, welcome. I don't know how to do these introduction things to videos because I don't do this that well at all. Anyways, we are here to talk about Titus Groan by Mervyn Peake, the first book in the Gormenghast trilogy / series, whatever you want to call it. And Marianne here recently read it. You blasted through it. Oh my god.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about it.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, awesome. But first, Marianne Guevara. I don't know how I first saw your channel, but I think it was, maybe I was searching for Spirit Goes Through Water, and one of your videos popped up because you had recently read it, and I'm like, I like this girl. And you read Jane Austen,
yeah.
and you read Books of Babel, and I'm like, ugh. She's great. All right, she's my new favorite. And then I convinced her to read Titus Groan. So win-win all around. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about your channel or whatever.
I'm Marianne Guevara. I started my booktube channel, I would say, it's been a while, like 5 years. Okay. I've started it mainly because, I just don't have anyone like in real life who also reads books as much as I do. And I just wanted an outlet to basically discuss my thoughts. And I don't know, I thought that YouTube channel, I don't know, I have a hard time when it comes to like public speaking, that type of thing. I thought making videos would kind of help me with that. I like to think it did a bit. But yeah, my booktube channel is literally just there to whatever strikes my fancy, I just want to talk about. So yeah, whether it's books, film, also I've done videos on film.
Nice. I really like your talk about Howl's Moving Castle. I liked that review, but
yeah.
But that's not the point. That's not why we're here. We're here to talk about Titus Groan. So, spoiler-free thoughts. You already said you loved it. That's awesome. That's really what everyone needs to know. It is fantastic. It's awesome. It's wonderful. I guess other spoiler-free general thoughts that you want to kind of throw out there.
Well, it's funny because like I've heard of Gormenghast. I've heard it before, but for some reason, I always thought it was like one of those epic poems, like Beowulf or like the Nibelungen. I thought Gormenghast was that. It wasn't until I saw that stream with you, Alan, and Anita and Pete, where you mentioned it was a trilogy and that it was Gothic fantasy. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. I thought it was like a Beowulf type of thing. So I looked it up. And yeah, it's apparently a Gothic fantasy trilogy, and that sounds right up my alley. I also watched a video, just a little bit, where someone described it, like they invoked Dickens, he mentioned Poe, and I was like, okay, I'm going to check this out. And I managed to find a copy on Penguin Books, and yeah, I just read it recently, and I adore it. It's like right up my alley. Right up my alley, for sure.
Yeah, Gothic fantasy is the only way that I can describe it. Like, that's the only successful way I've felt like, because it's so... To be fair, I have not read Lord of the Rings, at least in its entirety. I've read Fellowship of the Ring, and I know it's constantly referred to Gormenghast as pre-Tolkien, pre-Lord of the Rings fantasy. But that's kind of selling it short, I feel like. Like, this is... I don't know how to describe it. It's just so interesting. There's a lot of depth to it. The writing is... You can tell he was a poet, because his writing is so lyrical and so dense, but also accessible at the same time. At least for me. And just his imagery throughout is...
Oh yeah, definitely. It was like, just reading the book, like the images just flood my mind, honestly. Just the way he describes it, all the little details, like he makes it magical in a way. Like there's this one scene where he describes like just the way the doctor's character, the way they blink. under his like huge magnify, like his glasses. Just like the way he describes it, it's so I don't know, it's so different.
Does your copy have the illustrations or any illustrations in it?
It does. It does. I don't know if it can be seen, but yeah, you do have the author's illustrations.
Yeah, like it's so good, so good. Yeah, and then on top of that, I remember I messaged you and I was like, hey, if that helps you to read Titus Groan sooner, it's an inspiration for Josiah Bancroft in the Books of Babel. And now that you've read it,
I can see it.
Can you confirm or deny?
I can see it. I can see it. Titus Groan, I feel like this this trilogy, I feel it's a great, because it is considered fantasy. I feel like if you're like me, who mainly read classics before, I feel like this is like a good series, along with the Books of Babel. They're good fantasy series for people who are mainly maybe just read classics and want to get into like the fantasy genre. Titus Groan, Books of Babel, I think these are they're good jumping off point, because they really appeal. I think they really appeal.
Yeah, it's definitely like a fantasy that's less about like the magic system and the fantastic, and more about just the dark whimsy of it all. So I can attest to that.
I looked a bit up online, and I know it said that it's part of the genre called fantasy of manners. That's what it's considered part of. Yeah, it's like a subgenre within fantasy called fantasy of manners.
Interesting.
Where it's like it's not much about battling external forces or magic like that. It's mainly about people sort of working in or be rebelling against this society, or this like it's more of an enclosed environment and people interacting and rebelling against that. Not so much about like anything big.
Yeah, like all the world.
I was unfamiliar that it was a subgenre.
Yeah, and I guess that goes with the gothic, or maybe goes with / overlaps the gothic aspect of it, where really, even though it's called Titus Groan, you got to go into it with the expectation that it's not actually, at least this first book, Titus Groan doesn't really play a part other than his birth. Like, it's about everyone around him, all this. I wouldn't even say it's a wide cast of characters, but perspectives within Gormenghast Castle, and Gormenghast Castle itself feels like a character in itself. And
yeah, definitely.
But yeah,
I like how you just when we start the book, it starts off with Titus's birth. That's what kind of kicks off everything.
Yeah.
But then Mervyn Peake kind of weaves us in and out of the different perspectives. So you're just constantly following each of these different characters, and it's smooth. It's very smooth. It flows well, I think.
Yeah. And I like how his chapters are titled, and they're very, I wouldn't say short stories, but they're very almost episodic in a way, while still moving the plot forward.
They could be kind of like little vignettes, but they do tie together. Sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially the further you get, and it's just at one point towards the end, I was like, I cannot put this down. I have to stay up and finish this book. but yeah. Anyways, I feel like I just want to dive into spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, go away and go read the book. So
all the time.
Yeah. So 3, 2, 1, spoilers start. Okay. I love how he starts this book with Mr. Rotkod. Is that how you say his name? Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Rotkod.
Yeah. And he ends it with Mr. Rotkod. It's like, it's so satisfying. And I'm like, oh, we're just coming back, and it's this the cyclical nature of it, but everything
it's full circle. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. But yeah, so I
it does give you
No, I was just gonna say that like his prose, I struggled with it for the longest time because it's literally taken me like over 10 years to read this book. Like I've started it, stopped it, started over again, started again, got a little bit further, started over. And I finally just was like, you know what? I'm going to read this book, dadgummit. And his prose, while still being accessible, just the density of his imagery and his word choice, because he does not waste a word. It takes all of my concentration and brain power to process, and it's so rewarding for me.
Mm.
So, but anyways, what were you gonna say?
I mean, there were definitely passages where I would like have to keep repeating, like go back over just to like really take in what I just read. For sure. He does have I can see why people like they mentioned Dickens. It's like very Dickensian. I feel that, I don't know, the way he writes like the character descriptions or maybe like their thought processes, it does remind me a bit of Victorian literature, Victorian classics.
Okay.
So, but then again, like Peake's prose is like, it's still very distinct, particularly with the imagery, for sure.
Yeah. That's, as someone who has not read much Victorian literature, I think the only Victorian literature I've read is Gaskell, North and South. Yeah. It makes me interested actually to like if I can get through this, I could probably get through Dickens, maybe, potentially, possibly. So it's really opened up my like possibilities for what I can read now. But yeah, so like you said, the catalyst of this book is the birth of Titus Groan. But we're introduced with Rotcod, and then Mr. Flay, and Steerpike. We can just go wherever. There's no rhyme or reason to this discussion. We can go wherever it goes.
Oh, yeah.
But I like Mr. Flay. I was intrigued by him. But the moment that we met Steerpike, and I'm like, this little punk is up to something. So he's gotta be doing something.
Honestly, yeah, he's probably. I know you mentioned in like one of the messages that you don't really like any of these characters. To be fair, like they're not terribly likable. But honestly, Steerpike. If I'm gonna pick a favorite, it's Steerpike, and it's strange because like when we were first introduced to him, he's like the kitchen boy. Swelter the cook is like picking on him, and then he tries to leave. He wants to go out. He wants breath of fresh air. He ends up getting locked in that room by Flay, and he ends up escaping. I don't know. When I first met him, I didn't really get a sense that he was gonna be like this villain. I don't know. Like I was just he actually came off as, okay, this is going to be a bit of our protagonist, but then just as you read him a bit more, you kind of understand that, yeah, this is kind of like a sociopath. Spike is pretty much a sociopath.
Well,
and it's only a bit more later that you kind of understand, yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think that's why I don't necessarily like any of the characters. Like, none of them are good characters. They are, for me,
no.
They're so distinct. The way that Peake writes his characters, they're almost caricaturish, but not quite. Like, they're very, I don't know, even just the way he illustrates them, literally, drawing them, it's just, he talks about, like, how their noses are so, like, distinct or what have you, and of course, I'm trying to go through the pages to find a picture, and none of them are popping up. But yeah, it's just so, I can almost feel like the darkness in all of these characters through his imagery. And so I'm like, I'm questioning everyone, like, who's gonna do what? Like, Titus's mother is a caricature of swooning and, vapors and Victorian, womanhood or whatever. His sister is
Nanny Slag.
No,
Oh,
so
yeah.
no, that's not Fuchsia. Fuchsia's the sister. Blanking.
Sister Nanny Slag. Nanny Slag is the one
the
Slag?
nursemaid or whatever. Yeah. Count. She had a name, and of course I'm blanking on it, but the Countess. The Countess.
Gertrude.
That's it.
Gertrude.
That's it. But yeah, like her and all her cats. Like, I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah. But yeah, they're not likable, and they all have like very distinct quirks, but at the same time, there's just something still interesting about them. And I feel like they just get a bit more interesting as time goes on. You know, like for instance, Flay. I was kind of like, I don't know about Flay. He's very much like that sycophant type of character who's just very loyal to the house. But then towards the end, where he slays Swelter and he becomes this like man in the woods, living off the land. It's like, maybe not so bad.
Start from here, and then Peake makes us so invested with these characters. You're like, I want Mr. Flay back.
Yeah.
Mr. Flay was great. But yeah, like, I mean, Swelter, like, oh my gosh, Swelter.
He was like, okay, he was off-putting from beginning to end, in my opinion. I think the way Peake described him, like, disgusted me the most. Like, he's just incredibly uncomfortable to read about. The way he's just describing him physically.
Yeah, and then all the kids in that first scene of them just like, I don't know, I just envision them like little birds like under him, like popping to whatever he's doing. He's just like lording over them like in the kitchens. Ugh. Yeah. But
yeah. And they're not just unappealing like initially in personality, but like Peake, like when he describes them, he did like everyone's ugly the way Peake describes them. Like, everyone is just unappealing physically and like personality wise. I mean, the amount of times that Peake, whenever he's describing Steerpike, always brings up his narrow high shoulders, his big forehead. And he puts out a lot of adjectives to describe Steerpike's forehead. Like a lot. Swollen, protruding, big.
Yeah. The way he describes his characters, it reminds me of, to be fair, it's been forever, but Roald Dahl. The way Roald Dahl would describe characters, like, very cartoonish. Like, in, if anyone's tiny, they're skeletal. If anyone's big, they're like, bulbous or whatever, or elephantine. And
very, very exaggerated.
It's just, exactly. It's exaggerated, so it gives you it leans into that sense of fantastic in that way, because you're like, am I on a psych trip or something like that? Like, what is happening? But yeah. Yeah, so speaking of psych trips, the Lord Gormenghast turning into an owl.
Oh my, yeah. I mean, what? Honestly, I felt so bad for him. I felt bad. I mean, I knew he was gonna break. I mean, he was already very like depressed. He was melancholic. That's how he's described. He's very much like a Roderick Usher from like the Fall of the House of Usher type of character. Like his sadness just pervades like the place that he's just situated in. Like the way, like it's such a all-consuming melancholy that it just affects his surroundings. So when the library burnt down, which is like his sole joy in life, it's like, yeah. I did not expect him to become like an owl, but I knew something was gonna break in him.
Yeah.
I had a bad feeling about it.
Yeah.
And then he got eaten. He got eaten by owls.
Oh my god.
And Swelter.
Honest to God, I forgot about that. I in my mind, he just turned into an owl and boop, 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 just flew off. But I
didn't he got eaten. Yeah. Gruesome. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Okay. Well, oh, that's great.
What other characters are there? Oh my god, the twins. Clarice and
yes.
Cora. How'd you feel about them? There's
So I'm trying to separate my perspectives and thoughts to just, or limited it to just Titus Groan. Again, they're
okay.
just very caricaturist. They remind me of if you've ever seen The Simpsons, they remind me of the Homer Simpson's aunts, I think it was, or his sisters or whatever, the two old lady twins, but just gothic-y. And they're just so they're just so delusional about themselves, and it's so
they
good.
are, and yeah, they're delusional. They're not bright, and it's just like Steerpike, like as soon as he sees them for the first time, like he sniffs out, like, okay, yeah, these two, I can work with these two. There's something I can do with them.
Well, I mean,
he knows right away.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I mean, that's obviously intentional in that they're so secluded, and they're like of the higher class or whatever, so they're even more secluded in this secluded area. So they just have themselves to feed off of, and it's a, or not a vicious cycle, but like it's they're feeding off of each other, and there's nothing to kind of bring them back down to reality or give them a reality check. And Steerpike is just using that to his advantage, and it's just so manipulative, that little Steerpike.
Yeah, I mean, I just what's it called? When he basically convinces them to like commit arson, it's like he knew how to pull he knew to pull the right strings. You know,
yep, and
you'll get
to
your
get
power. Yeah.
Yep.
Gertrude will be put aside and everything, and it's like, wow, like it just fit perfectly.
And that, I think that's just a really cool thing that Peake does, is that he makes these things happen that when you look back on it, like it seems very like step 1, step 2, step 3, very straightforward, very linear, or not linear, but very expected, but you also don't expect it at the same time. At least I didn't. And it's just, again, the atmosphere, to just reiterate endlessly. His sense of imagery and atmosphere, it's so enveloping that it makes you kind of forget what's going on, and you're just in that moment with the characters as you're going, so you're not expecting things when they happen.
Yeah, it's incredibly immersive. It's probably the most immersive book I've read this year. And I don't know if it was the same thing for you, but whenever he's describing the actual castle, I found myself having a hard time like trying to imagine it. I don't know, just it's really hard to kind of like visualize all the particular details. It's just I couldn't do it, honestly.
Yeah,
it's so hard.
I imagined it in my head. The only way I could imagine it was that it was almost like a funhouse castle, like that it was with that character, it being a character in itself. And I'm like, there are probably these hallways that go to nowhere, and this, like, I don't know, it's just the only way I could imagine it was akin to a funhouse. Not that there's mirrors or anything like that, but it's just so fantastic that I'm like, I can't imagine this. All I know is it's massive and huge, and that's it. But it's still so, he makes it so small at the same time because of these characters that are so isolated.
Yeah, because and we're only following a certain set of characters and their ongoings in the house.
exactly.
How did you feel about Kata's parts of the book? The nursemaid.
I did not expect to cry in this book, but I did with her arc. And I loved like her mini arc with the two lovers that she had.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect for a book from the 50s to go into as much detail as it did about sex or murder, to be honest. But again, the way that he described it is so poetic. He describes everything poetically.
Yeah.
But Kata's arc was just, it was so tragic, and I could not wait. I'm like, all right, she has this kid. Like, somehow there's gonna be some sort of connection with her daughter and Titus. And so when it ends and you see Titus like waving to the kid over in the town, or the port area,
and she responds,
like, yes, there we go. I was like, there we go. I like gave me what I wanted.
Yeah, when I first read the Kata parts, I was kind of confused. That okay, we're following her, and then we're going back to the castle and what's going on there, and then we keep following her. And I was like wondering, okay, I like it, but like, why is Peake focusing on this? A part of me feels like he does it, I think, to put into contrast life outside the castle and life inside Gormenghast, because with Kata, when we're following her, she goes through a lot. I feel like she lives an entire life almost, with her two lovers and their death, and then she roams, and then she has, she stays with that old man to heal, and she gives birth, and then she eventually dies. Like she's lived an entire life. And then while that's happening, you have this very insulated, secluded, events going on in Gormenghast. I think it's like meant to, in a way, I think contrast how time almost is like crawling, where it's like stalled inside the walls of Gormenghast, while on the outside, there's so much already happening.
And they talk about like the comparison of the we start with the Hall of the Bright Carvings, where Gormenghast is full of this, well, not full of, but the Hall of Bright Carvings is full of the carvings that these people make, and there's just this complete social separation between these two groups, but yet their whole identity is surrounding these carvings that they then give to the Lord of Gormenghast as like prizes or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, like everything that Peake explores in that very simple like scene with these carvings, and then to your point, like Kata's arc is just, she lives so fully and completely in the midst of everything that's going on, but yet it's only like 9 months, 10 months, something like that.
It's not long.
So good.
And I think with like the carvings as well, it's all part of a ritual. And one of the major, I think, emphasis on Titus Groan is the fact that this Gormenghast is, you have a family, you have an institution that is so run by rituals. Yes. They're constantly run by it. And people don't really know what the reason is for. Like, why does it have to be this way? Why do we have to do it at a certain time on this date or whatever? It's like, no one knows. We just do it. We have forgotten the reason, behind everything, but we just continue on. Yeah. So it's a place and it's a people that is just ruled by rigid rituals. And I think that's kind of the reason why I'm in a way, cheering on Steerpike because he's interfering with that. He's messing it up. He's adding a bit of the chaos into it for the sake of his own ambition, but in a way, he's like making things exciting. He's putting the fire under their feet in a way.
True. Who it was not Dr. Prune Squalor, and
Prune
not
Squalor.
Mr.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Sepulcrave. Is that it? He was
the Lord
ritual
Sepulcrave.
No, no,
that was it was Sour Dust, I think, originally,
Sour Dust,
but then he died. Yeah.
Yeah, too many S names. But yeah, Sour Dust. He was the ritual master, or Lord of Rituals, or whatever. Yeah. So like it's so weird. So weird. Like everything is so weird, but it works. And I'm just like, more of this, please. But Dr. Prune Squalor.
Very quirky.
Yeah, it's very quirky. Very
quirky.
But Dr. Prune Squalor.
Yeah. Squalor.
I did like his character. Well, I liked all of the characters, even though I didn't like them at the same time. It's a weird contradiction.
Yeah, it's weird.
But Dr. Prune Squalor was interesting.
He was. I didn't know what to think of him when I first saw him. But I feel like as the book continued on, I warmed up to him a bit. He's funny. I like him. He has some funny lines in the book. Yeah, him and his sister. Yeah. Irma. Oh my gosh, you need to calm down.
Yeah, good old Irma.
Irma needs to chill.
I mean, I'll just say I think you will very much enjoy the second book because, yeah.
I feel like the general consensus I've seen online or anywhere where they talk about Titus Groan the trilogy, that Gormenghast is the best. That people love Titus Groan, but they say Gormenghast is better. So I already started, so
nice.
Excited. Very excited.
How you finished Titus Groan in like what, less than a week?
I think like a week, yeah, a week.
So you'll probably get that done in like what, probably less than 2 weeks.
We'll see. Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, if I'm loving a book, I will find a way to blaze through it.
But yeah, so Prune Squalor, who was the other one? Barquentine?
What character are we missing? Yeah, that was the son of Sour Dust. Was it Sour Dust? Yeah. He was a son that took up his position.
Yeah, after he got burned in the library.
Uh-huh.
Again, freaking Steerpike. I'm just saying.
Planned it perfectly. To a T. It worked so perfectly.
Yeah. Ugh. But if I had to pick my favorite character in the book, it's Fuchsia.
Yeah, I love Fuchsia. Fuchsia's good too.
I didn't think I would like her because when you're introduced to her, you know she's a spoiled little brat.
Yeah, she's great.
But I loved how she developed.
Yeah, definitely.
So good.
It's kind of sad actually, because at the point where Sepulcrave, her father, goes mad, you see her, like she's spending time with him, and you kind of see her like opening up and having warm feelings towards her father, but then at the same time, he's going mad. So at the moment when she's like feeling close, like she's also losing him because he's
right.
His mental state is not good.
I did feel really, really bad for Fuchsia in that she has this like parent-child relationship with Nanny Slag, but then she kind of, again, similar to how she's getting closer with her father, and then as she's getting closer and getting more vulnerable, she's losing him. That kind of coincides with Nanny, like her losing that parent-child relationship with Nanny Slag, who's focusing more on Titus.
Yeah.
And so Fuchsia becomes almost like a parent to Titus as well. And it's just, I felt so bad for Fuchsia, because she doesn't, again, she's part of the upper class. She doesn't have any siblings her age, any friends her age. Her father's going mad. Her mother is a cat lady. Not that there's anything wrong with being a cat lady, just to say. But literally a mountain of white cats out. So she has no one to connect with. So I think that's why I had hope for her and Steerpike. But then I was also like, oh, Steerpike's gonna try and manipulate her. Yeah, so I was just saying that I felt really bad for Fuchsia in that her relationship with Nanny Slag, she has this parent-child relationship with her, and it's shifting as soon as Titus is born. Nanny Slag is just like focusing entirely on Titus because she has this new child, and poor Fuchsia is losing Nanny Slag, so then she kind of grasps on to her father a little bit, while also, like you mentioned before, losing him a little bit as well at the same time. And she just has no one. She doesn't have anyone her own age. Her father is losing it. Her mother is...
She's very isolated. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I had hope for her and Steerpike. I'm like, oh, this could be like a little, star-crossed lovers type thing or whatever. But I was also like, I'm still nervous about Steerpike, and I don't trust him.
I'm not gonna. I do not have hope for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like...
Yeah, so when he like sees her and like invades her attic room, like that's her one area to be herself and be comfortable and have like solace, and he just invades it. Unintentionally, but still. I just I want good things for Fuchsia. That's all I want.
She really does have to grow up. And I feel like she gets that, you get a good sense of it, because there's one part in the book where she admits that she has outgrown her attic now. Like, it's changed for her. It doesn't have the same power it had, or feeling that it had. And then she starts also viewing Nanny Slag differently. Like, she's starting to realize just how vulnerable and a bit silly that Nanny Slag is. And yeah, like, her mother just closes everyone off aside from her pets, her animals, and her father is going mad. And she does talk a bit with the doctor, but Steerpike is like, the one person in the castle that is around her age. And towards the end of Titus Groan, even in the beginning of Gormenghast, there is an attraction she has, and it's not physical. It's more of like she's attracted to his youth, because they're around the same age as one another.
Well, when there's a lack of options, you can't be picky.
It is slim pickings in Gormenghast. Very slim pickings. So yeah. And then, it's just, once again, it's perfect. It's right picking for Steerpike. It's just like, the situations are like perfectly tailored for him to take advantage of. It's like he sees this, she's the princess type of thing, and she's lonely, she's isolated, she can also be a bit manipulated. He can like find a way to manipulate her if he wished to.
Although with that said, the part, it was about a little over halfway through Titus Groan, the part that I like fist bumped a little bit. It's when Steerpike and Fuchsia are talking, and I can't remember if they're in the attic room or not. But he says, or she asks, "Do you give names to other things like that?" And he says, "Sometimes I have a disrespectful nature." And she asks, "Do you give people names?" "I have done." And she asks, "Have you got one for me?" He responds, "I don't think I have. I usually think of you as Lady Fuchsia." And she asks, do you call my mother anything? Your mother? Yes. What do you call my mother? I call her the old bunch of rags, said Steerpike. Fuchsia's eyes opened wide and she stood still again. Go away, she said. That's not very fair, said Steerpike. After all, you asked me. What do you call my father, then? But I don't want to know. I think you're cruel, said Fuchsia breathlessly. You who said you'd stop cruelty altogether. Tell me some more names. Are they all unkind and funny? And I'm like, yes, Fuchsia! Call him out on his bullcrap!
Yeah, but in a way, she I think towards the end of the book, I forget where it was, but she said she does admit that she likes his disrespectful nature.
Yeah.
Like it's like with her, she's like both repelled and attracted to him at the same time because he's young, he's different, and it doesn't. Yeah.
And that's exactly how I feel about Steerpike and all of the characters in this book. So
yeah, you're both repelled and attracted by him. Also, it doesn't help that. Did you read Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, do you remember that scene with where Marianne gets hurt and Willoughby has to, carry her. He like pretty much saves her. So it's like Steerpike pulls a Willoughby on Fuchsia doing that scene in the rain. It's like, oh boy. He's slowly getting her. It's like at that point I'm like, oh boy. Yeah, he's slowly getting his hooks in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm still at the beginning of Gormenghast, but I know there's gonna be something coming up.
Even more.
Oh boy.
Yeah, just a tiny voice in the, sorry to completely switch gears, but I'm kind of going through highlights or whatever that I made, and it's like a tiny voice in the absolute stillness. It filled the universe, a cry like the single note of a bird. It floated over the water from the dwellers, from where the woman stood apart from her kind, from the throat of the little child of Cata's womb, the bastard babe and Titus's foster sister, lambent with ghostlight. And I'm like, that's so good. Like, who describes stuff like that? Mervyn Peake, apparently.
It's beautiful. Very evocative. The imagery here that he's describing, it's such an evocative book, honestly.
And again, the way he describes the castle, like at the start and also at the end, like again, going with Mr. Rutcod as opening and closing the book, like the castle was breathing. And far below the Hall of Bright carvings, all that was Gormenghast revolved. And it feels so like not tangible, but what's the word I'm looking for? It's just the castle, like it just feels like a character. It feels like a living thing that has a part to play in this entire story. And it's just it's so good.
Honestly, in my mind's eye, it's just like this massive gothic behemoth of a castle. Like when I think of Gormenghast, like I can't even imagine sunlight, honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
I know there is sunlight that has been described in Titus Groan, but I just can't. Whenever I think of the castle and just the whole thing, I can't imagine Gormenghast bathed in beautiful sunlight or anything like that. It's just that it doesn't cross my mind.
Shadows and darkness.
Yeah,
and
cobwebs and everything. Yeah.
I can't remember. Have you read any Discworld by Terry Pratchett?
I haven't. I do wanna read Terry Pratchett. Like people keep recommending Terry Pratchett. I just don't know where to start.
Okay, so I read Alan from the Library of Alexandria will tell you guards. But I technically started with Color of Magic, but I restarted, multiple years later with Equal Rights. And I read Equal Rights, and he makes a reference to what's called the university. And he references the size of the university and basically says that it makes Gormenghast look small. And I'm like, that, like, I had literally just read like Titus Groan like a few months prior to that, and I'm like, oh, I know the reference. So just that it's so, this story is so obviously influential on so many people, including other writers, is just, I'm so glad that I finally read this book, and I got you to read it, so now I have someone to talk to about it.
Yes. Yeah, there's not, honestly, looking through YouTube, there's a few, but not a lot of videos on Gormenghast, on Titus Groan. I feel like more people ought to read it, because yeah, it is pretty influential. I know a lot of writers have taken inspiration from the Gormenghast trilogy, and more people ought to give this book a try. Honestly,
It is fantastic. Yeah. So how far into Gormenghast are you? The second book?
I am very, like, in the beginning. I am about to start chapter 8. I finished the scene where what's it called? Dr. Prunesqualler and Gertrude are like discussing that something is afoot in Gormenghast. Some treachery is afoot. We don't know exactly where, but yeah.
Nice. Okay. So we'll definitely talk about it when you finish, maybe, possibly, potentially, question mark?
Yes. I'm game, for sure.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know what else I can say about this book other than it's so good.
It's so immersive. It's so, yes, it's, the descriptions can be, especially if you're not used to this type of prose, it can be a bit daunting, but I don't know, from people who have read it, they say it's very much well worth it. It is. Oh, yeah. I love these type of stories, honestly, where it's like confined into one area and you're following all these different characters. You're dealing with, power shifting and all that, and I love it.
The style of it all, not even style, but like the atmosphere, like that, like the atmosphere is just so ingrained in everything, in the castle, in the world, in the characters, and it's just in the prose itself. It's just so good. But yeah, we're coming up on an hour, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'm sure you just want to get back to Gormenghast, which I fully support.
Thank you. Oh wait, by the way, I need to ask you something.
Yes.
Did you know that there was a BBC adaptation of Gormenghast, actually, from 2000?
So I didn't know that until after I finished the first book, and I was like, okay, so I gotta read the trilogy. I gotta read the series before I can read, or before I can watch it. And apparently, allegedly, supposedly, it only covers like the first 2 books. So
okay. I'm not gonna lie, I watched some clips.
Oh, okay.
I watched some clips because I could not wait. I was waiting for Gormenghast, and I just saw the clips of like the parts of like Titus Groan. And
okay.
It's interesting. It honestly feels more, in terms of like the sets and everything, more like Alice in Wonderland-ish.
Oh,
the quirky vibes and everything. Just the setting.
Not quite dark.
No, there's a lot of bright scenes that kind of just felt wrong.
Oh,
and
that's a little disappointing.
Yeah. But Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia are in there though, and Christopher Lee.
No way. That's cool.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna have to go search this out. Maybe watch it now. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Other than it's great, and honestly, people honestly need to read this book. More people ought to read this book. If you're into like Gothic literature, classics, just try out Titus Groan. I feel like it's such a good gateway into fantasy, honestly.
And also, I mean, to echo what you were saying earlier, like for people that are into classics, like this is a good way to get into fantasy, and also people that are into fantasy that want to get into classics. I think this is a good way, the other way, to get into classics. It's just so worth it. So worth it.
Yeah. Works both ways. I can't wait to get to Gormenghast, see how it is.
Yeah. And then, spoiler alert for everyone, I bullied Marianne into reading Titus Alone with me, so when she gets to it.
And I get my copy. I'm not going to wait. I will order it right away.
All right, well, I don't know how to sign off on these things, but Marianne's channel, I probably should have mentioned this at the get-go, but Marianne's channel is going to be listed down below in the description. Make sure to subscribe to her if you haven't already. And yeah, go read Titus Groan. That's all you need to know. So